Part 1. The stars burned bright in the endless blackness of space, millions of them scattered like diamonds across the void. For centuries, humanity had looked up at those stars with wonder and hope, dreaming of a future among them. Now, in the year 3124, that dream was reality, but it came at a cost. Earth, once the cradle of life, was nothing more than a distant memory, a forgotten relic of the past. It was a planet scarred beyond recognition, abandoned after centuries of greed, war, and neglect. Few dared to speak of it, and even fewer cared to remember. Jack Monroe leaned back in the pilot's chair of his ship, the Iron Wren, staring at the flickering control panel. The ship wasn't much to look at. Its hull was patched together from scrap metal, and the engines groaned under the strain of every jump through hyperspace. But it was his, and it kept him alive. Jack had spent most of his life scavenging the remains of dead worlds, picking through ruins for anything valuable enough to sell. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills, and more importantly, it kept him far away from the politics and power struggles of the galactic empires. Across the cockpit, Claire Harper sat hunched over her datapad, her brow furrowed in concentration. Unlike Jack, who preferred action over thought, Claire was a thinker. She was a xenobiologist by trade, though her real passion lay in uncovering the secrets of humanity's ancient history. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and her green eyes darted across the screen as she analyzed fragments of data they'd picked up during their last mission. "Anything useful?" Jack asked, breaking the silence. His voice was rough, tinged with boredom. Claire didn't look up. "Maybe," she said slowly. "It's hard to tell. These transmissions are so old, they're almost completely degraded. But there's something here. Something about Earth." Jack straightened. In his seat, his interest piqued despite himself. "Earth? What about it?" "I'm not sure yet," Claire admitted, tapping a few commands into her device. "But these signals seem to be coming from deep beneath the surface. There's mention of some kind of facility, something important enough to protect even after everyone left." Jack frowned. "You know what they say about Earth. It's a death trap now. Radiation levels are off the charts and the atmosphere's full of toxic chemicals. Whoever built this facility probably didn't survive long enough to enjoy it," Claire shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe they left something behind on purpose, something worth protecting." Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You think it's worth checking out?" "It could be," Claire replied, finally looking up at him. "If we can find out why humanity became so adaptable, why we survived when other species didn't, it could change everything. Imagine what we could learn." Jack sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He knew better than to argue with Claire when she got like this. Once she had an idea in her head, there was no stopping her. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was a bad idea. Earth wasn't just dangerous, it was cursed. Everyone knew the stories. Entire cities swallowed by storms, oceans turned to acid, skies choked with ash. No one went there unless they had no other choice. But Claire wasn't asking for permission. She was already plotting a course, her fingers flying over the controls. Jack watched her for a moment, then shook his head. "All right, fine, but if we die down there, I'm blaming you." Claire smirked. "Deal." The journey to Earth took longer than either of them expected. Hyperspace travel was unpredictable, especially in regions of space as unstable as Sol system. By the time they arrived, both were restless and irritable. As they approached the planet, the view outside the viewport confirmed their worst fears. Earth was a nightmare made real. Its once blue oceans were murky and lifeless, its continents obscured by swirling clouds of dust and smoke. Lightning flashed, constantly, illuminating the jagged peaks of mountains that rose like broken teeth from the surface. "This is insane," Jack muttered, gripping the controls tightly. "We're gonna get ourselves killed." "We'll be fine," Claire said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Just focus on landing." Easier said than done. The atmosphere was turbulent, filled with debris and charged particles that battered the ship as they descended. Alarms blared, warning lights flashing red across the dashboard. Jack gritted his teeth, fighting to keep the iron wren steady. Finally, with a jolt that rattled every bone in their bodies, the ship touched down on solid ground. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Jack let out a low whistle. "Well, that was fun. Let's never do it again." Claire ignored him, peering out the viewport at the desolate landscape. They had landed near what used to be North America, though it was impossible to tell anymore. The horizon was shrouded in haze, and the air smelled faintly of sulfur. Ruins stretched as far as the eye could see, skeletal remains of skyscrapers, half buried in sand and ash. Nature had begun reclaiming the land, vines twisting around crumbling walls, trees sprouting from cracked pavement. But there was something else too, something unnatural. "What's that?" Claire asked, pointing toward a cluster of structures in the distance. They were sleek and metallic, standing out sharply against the decay around them. Unlike the ruins, these buildings appeared intact, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. "No idea," Jack said, grabbing his rifle, "but I'm guessing it's not friendly." They suited up quickly, donning environmental suits designed to filter out the toxic air. Stepping outside felt surreal, like walking through a graveyard frozen in time. Every step kicked up clouds of dust, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the hum of their suits' life support systems. As they drew closer to the mysterious structures, they noticed strange symbols etched into the walls, symbols that didn't match any known language. "Looks like someone didn't want us finding this place," Jack said, running a hand over one of the markings. "Whoever built this put a lot of effort into keeping it hidden." Claire nodded, scanning the area with her handheld device. "There's energy readings coming from inside. Whatever's powering these buildings, it's still active." Before they could investigate further, a sudden movement caught their attention. A group of drones emerged from the shadows, their mechanical limbs whirring as they locked onto the intruders. Without hesitation, Jack raised his rifle and fired, taking down the first drone before it could attack. Claire ducked behind a nearby pillar, pulling out her own weapon. "Guess we found the welcome committee," Jack shouted, firing another shot. The battle was short but intense. The drones were relentless, swarming them from all sides. But Jack and Claire fought back with equal determination, using the ruins as cover while they picked off their attackers one by one. When the last drone fell, the silence returned, heavier than before. "Well, that was pleasant," Jack said dryly, lowering his rifle. Claire stepped forward cautiously, examining the fallen machines. "These aren't human-made," she said, frowning. "At least not entirely. Someone modified them, or built them specifically to guard this place." Jack glanced around uneasily. "Great. So we've got ancient tech, weird symbols, and killer robots. Anything else we should know?" Claire hesitated, then held up her scanner. "There's a tunnel leading underground. Whatever's down there, it's where the energy readings are strongest." Jack sighed, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Of course it is. Lead the way, genius." As they descended into the darkness, neither of them could shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The air grew colder, the walls closing in around them. Somewhere ahead, a faint glow beckoned them forward, promising answers, but also danger. Whatever awaited them below, it was clear that Earth still held secrets buried deep within its scarred heart, and Jack and Claire were about to uncover them, whether they wanted to or not. Part 2. The tunnel was narrow and dimly lit, the faint blue glow casting long shadows on the walls. Jack Monroe led the way, his rifle at the ready, while Claire Harper followed closely behind, clutching her scanner like a lifeline. The air was damp and cold, carrying an odd metallic tang that made it hard to breathe even through their suits. Every step echoed loudly in the silence, a reminder of how isolated they were from the rest of the galaxy. "This place gives me the creeps," Jack muttered, glancing over his shoulder. His voice sounded muffled inside his helmet, but the tension in it was clear. Claire didn't respond right away. She was too busy analyzing the readings on her device. "Whatever's down here, it's big. These energy signatures are off the charts." "Big usually means dangerous," Jack replied, tightening his grip on his weapon. "You sure this is worth it?" Claire hesitated for a moment before nodding. If we can figure out what happened here, why humanity left Earth, it might help us understand why we're still alive out there. She gestured vaguely toward the surface, though they both knew the stars were light years away by now. Jack sighed, but didn't argue further. He trusted Claire, even if her curiosity sometimes got them into trouble. Besides, turning back wasn't really an option, not after those drones had attacked them. Whatever was guarding this place clearly didn't want visitors. As they moved deeper into the tunnel, the walls began to change. The rough stone gave way to smooth metal panels etched with the same strange symbols they'd seen outside. Some of the panels glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm as though alive. Claire stopped to examine one of them, running her gloved fingers over the markings. These symbols, they're not random, she said thoughtfully. They're part of some kind of code, maybe instructions or warnings. Warnings sound about right, Jack grumbled. Let's hope it's not, enter at your own risk. Claire rolled, her eyes but smiled beneath her helmet. Despite his gruff exterior, Jack had a dry sense of humor that often helped lighten the mood. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and every shadow seemed to shift just out of sight. Eventually, the tunnel opened up into a massive chamber. The ceiling stretched high above them, disappearing into darkness, while rows of towering machines lined the walls. Most of them were inactive, covered in layers of dust and grime, but a few emitted low hums, their lights flickering weakly. In the center of the room stood a large circular platform surrounded by control panels. It looked like some kind of terminal, though its purpose was unclear. Looks like we found the heart of the facility, Claire said, stepping forward cautiously. Her scanner beeped rapidly as she approached the platform, indicating a spike in energy levels. Or maybe the belly of the beast, Jack added, keeping his rifle trained on the shadows. This place feels like it's waiting for something. Claire ignored him, her focus entirely on the terminal. She set her scanner down and began examining the controls, trying to decipher their functions. After a few moments, she pressed a button experimentally. The reaction was immediate. The entire chamber came to life. Lights blazed overhead, illuminating the space in stark detail, while the dormant machines roared to life with mechanical groans. A holographic display materialized above the platform, showing images of Earth as it once was. Blue oceans, green forests, bustling cities. What did you do? Jack asked, startled by the sudden activity. I think I activated the archives, Claire replied, her voice tinged with excitement. Look at this. These are records of Earth's final days. The holograms shifted, displaying scenes of chaos and destruction. Massive storms ravaged the planet, swallowing entire cities in floods and fire. Wars raged across continents, leaving behind scorched earth and abandoned ruins. Then came the genetic experiments, images of scientists working tirelessly in labs, injecting subjects with unknown substances, monitoring their progress. Claire's breath caught in her throat as she realized what she was seeing. They were trying to adapt humans, she whispered, to make us stronger, more resilient. That's how we survived the Exodus. Jack frowned, leaning closer to get a better look. So we owe our survival to mad science? Great. Just what we needed to hear. Before Claire could respond, the display changed again. This time, it showed something different, something darker. Soldiers clad in black armor marched through burning streets, their faces obscured by helmets. They moved with unnatural precision, their bodies glowing faintly with bioluminescent veins. Behind them, entire populations fell, either fleeing in terror or collapsing where they stood. What the hell is that? Jack asked, his voice tight with unease. I don't know, Claire admitted, her excitement replaced by dread. But whatever it is, it's not human, not completely. The hologram faded abruptly, plunging the chamber into silence once again. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of what they'd just witnessed hung heavy in the air, pressing down on them like a physical force. We need to keep moving, Claire said finally, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. There's more here, more answers. We can't stop now. Jack nodded reluctantly, though his instincts screamed at him to turn back. All right, but if things get worse, we bail. Deal? Deal, Claire agreed, though they both knew she wouldn't leave until she'd uncovered everything. They continued exploring the chamber, searching for clues about the soldiers and the experiments. One of the control panels caught Claire's attention. A series of buttons arranged in the same pattern as the symbols they'd seen earlier. She hesitated for a moment, then pressed them in sequence. The ground trembled slightly as a hidden door slid open, revealing a staircase leading downward. Of course there's another level, Jack muttered, shaking his head. Why does it always have to be stairs? Claire grinned, despite herself. Relax. It's probably just storage. Yeah, because nothing bad ever happens in basements, Jack shot back sarcastically. Ignoring his comment, Claire started down the stairs, her scanner lighting the way. The staircase was steep and narrow, spiraling deeper into the earth until they reached another chamber. This one was smaller than the last, but no less impressive. Rows of cryogenic pods lined the walls, each containing a human figure suspended in a gel-like substance. Monitors above the pods displayed vital signs, though most of them were flatlined. Guess we found the test subjects, Jack said grimly, peering into one of the pods. The person inside looked peaceful, almost serene, but there was something unsettling about their appearance. Their skin was pale and translucent, their veins glowing faintly beneath the surface. Claire scanned the pods quickly, her brow furrowed in concentration. Most of these people are dead, but she trailed off, pointing to a pod at the far end of the room. Its monitor still showed signs of life. Jack followed her gaze, his stomach sinking. You don't think... Before he could finish, the pod hissed softly, and the glass panel slid open. A man stepped out, blinking against the light as he took his first breath in centuries. His body was lean and muscular, his skin marked by the same glowing veins as the others. But it was his eyes that drew their attention, bright and intelligent yet devoid of pupils. Who are you? Claire asked cautiously, taking a step back. The man tilted his head, studying them with an expression that was both curious and calculating. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, carrying an otherworldly quality. I am Ethan Cole, he said slowly, as if testing the words. And you are human. Jack raised his rifle instinctively, though he wasn't sure it would do any good. Stay back, he warned, his finger hovering over the trigger. Ethan raised his hands in a gesture of peace, though his glowing eyes never left theirs. I mean you no harm, he said calmly, but you should not be here. This place, it is not safe. Claire lowered her scanner, her mind racing. What do you mean? What is this place? Ethan hesitated, his gaze flickering between them. It is a tomb, he said finally. A monument to humanity's greatest failure and its darkest secret. Neither Jack nor Claire spoke as the weight of his words settled over them. Whatever answers they had hoped to find, they were beginning to realize that some truths were better left buried. Part 3. Ethan Cole stood before them, his glowing eyes piercing through the dim light of the chamber. His presence was unsettling, not because he seemed dangerous, but because he didn't seem entirely human. The faint hum of energy radiating from his body made the air around him feel charged, like standing too close to a storm. Claire Harper stared at him, her mind racing with questions, while Jack Monroe kept his rifle trained on Ethan, his finger hovering over the trigger. Start talking, Jack said sharply, his voice cutting through the silence. Who are you? What is this place? Ethan tilted his head slightly, as though considering how much to reveal. I am what remains of Project Erebus, he began slowly, a creation born out of desperation and hubris. This facility was designed to ensure humanity's survival, to adapt us for life beyond Earth. Claire stepped forward cautiously, lowering her scanner. Adapt us? You mean genetically modify humans? Ethan nodded. Yes, but Erebus went further than simple adaptation. We were engineered to be stronger, faster, more resilient, to survive in any environment, even the void of space itself. Jack frowned, glancing at the rows of cryogenic pods surrounding them. Most of them were dark, their occupants long dead. So what happened? Why are you the only one still alive? Ethan's expression darkened, and for the first time there was a flicker of emotion in his otherwise calm demeanor. The project succeeded, but it also failed. Those of us who survived the modifications, we were no longer fully human. Our minds became linked through something called the Nexus, a shared consciousness that allowed us to act as one. It was supposed to unite us, to make us unstoppable. But it didn't work out that way, Claire guessed, her voice soft. No, Ethan admitted. The Nexus fractured. Some of us lost ourselves in its chaos, unable to distinguish between our own thoughts and the collective. Others turned against humanity altogether, seeing themselves as superior beings. The rebellion destroyed most of Earth, leaving it in ruins. Jack lowered his rifle slightly, though he remained wary. And you? Where do you fit into all this? I was different, Ethan said simply. I retained my individuality, even within the Nexus. When the others rebelled, I chose to shut myself down rather than join them. I hoped that one day when humanity returned, I could help undo the damage we caused. Claire let out a slow breath, processing everything she'd just heard. If what you're saying is true, then this changes everything. If we can control the Nexus, if we can use it responsibly, it could unite humanity again. Help us face the challenges ahead. Jack groaned, shaking his head. Are you seriously suggesting we trust this guy? He's not exactly normal, Claire. I'm not asking for your trust, Ethan interjected calmly. Only your understanding. The Nexus is powerful, but it is also dangerous. Without proper guidance, it could destroy everything it touches. Claire turned to Jack, her green eyes pleading. We have to try, Jack. Think about it. What if we could bring humanity together? End the wars, the greed, the division? Isn't that worth the risk? Jack hesitated, torn between his instinct to protect Claire and his skepticism about Ethan's intentions. Finally, he sighed. Fine. But if this goes south, don't say I didn't warn you. Relieved, Claire turned back to Ethan. How do we reactivate the Nexus? And how do we make sure it doesn't spiral out of control again? Ethan gestured toward the center of the chamber, where a massive console stood surrounded by dormant machinery. The core of the Nexus lies beneath that platform. Reactivating it will require accessing the mainframe and restoring its systems. However, he paused, his glowing eyes narrowing slightly. Doing so will awaken the remnants of the Nexus. They may not take kindly to our interference. Great, Jack muttered under his breath. Just what we needed. A bunch of angry super soldiers. We'll deal with that when it happens, Claire said firmly, already moving toward the console. Let's focus on getting the Nexus online first. Ethan followed her, his movements fluid and deliberate. Be careful. The system has been dormant for centuries. There may be unforeseen complications. Claire nodded, setting her scanner aside and beginning to examine the controls. The interface was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Panels of smooth metal etched with intricate patterns that shifted and rearranged themselves as she touched them. She worked quickly, her fingers flying over the surface as she deciphered the alien-like symbols. Meanwhile, Jack kept watch, pacing the edges of the chamber with his rifle ready. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft hum of machinery and the occasional beep from Claire's scanner. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound echoed unnaturally. He couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone, that something was watching them from the darkness. After several tense minutes, Claire let out a triumphant sigh. Got it. The system's rebooting. The chamber came alive once again, lights flaring brightly as the machinery roared to life. The platform in the center began to rise, revealing a pulsating orb of energy suspended within a lattice of wires and circuits. The Nexus core. Its glow intensified, casting an eerie blue light across the room. That's it? Jack asked, eyeing the orb skeptically. That's the big secret, It's more than it appears, Ethan said quietly. The Nexus is not just technology. It is a living network, a connection between minds. To control it requires strength, both mental and physical. As if on cue, the ground trembled violently, knocking everyone off balance. Alarms blared and the walls began to shift, panels sliding open to reveal hidden compartments filled with weapons and gear. "What now?" Jack shouted, struggling to regain his footing. "The Nexus knows we're here," Ethan replied grimly. "It's testing us." Claire grabbed her scanner, checking the readings frantically. "Energy levels are spiking. We need to stabilize the core before it overloads." "Stabilize it how?" Jack demanded, looking between her and Ethan. Ethan stepped forward, placing a hand on the edge of the platform. "I can anchor it for now, but it won't hold indefinitely. You must find a permanent solution." Before anyone could respond, the chamber filled with a low, resonant hum. Shadows coalesced into humanoid shapes, their forms flickering like static. These weren't drones or machines. They were fragments of the Nexus, remnants of those who had once been part of the collective. "They're coming," Ethan warned, his voice tight with urgency. "You must act quickly." Claire glanced at Jack, her expression resolute. "Cover me, I'll figure this out." Jack nodded, raising his rifle as the shadowy figures advanced. "You better hurry." Claire turned back to the console, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, each command bringing the Nexus closer to stability. Behind her, Jack fired shot after shot, holding off the encroaching entities as best he could. Ethan stood beside her, his body glowing brighter as he poured his energy into anchoring the core. "Almost there," Claire shouted, sweat dripping down her face despite the cool air inside her suit. "Just a few more adjustments." The shadows pressed closer, their distorted faces twisted with rage. One of them lunged at Jack, forcing him to dive out of the way. He rolled to his feet, firing blindly as he scrambled to reposition himself. "Claire," he yelled. "Hurry up!" With a final keystroke, Claire slammed her palm against the console. The humming stopped abruptly, and the shadows froze mid-motion before dissipating into nothingness. The Nexus core pulsed steadily, its glow softening to a gentle blue. "It's stable," Claire breathed, collapsing onto her knees in relief. Ethan staggered backward, his body flickering faintly as the strain of anchoring the core took its toll. "For now," he said weakly. "But it won't last forever. You must decide what to do next." Jack lowered his rifle, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. "Decide what? Whether to keep playing God with this thing?" "No," Claire said firmly, standing up and meeting his gaze. "Decide whether we're strong enough to handle the responsibility. If we can't, then maybe it's better left buried." Ethan nodded slowly, his glowing eyes dimming as exhaustion overtook him. "The choice is yours. But remember, the Nexus is not just power, it is unity. And unity comes at a cost." The three of them stood in silence, the weight of their decision hanging heavy in the air. Whatever happened next, they knew one thing for certain. Earth's secrets were far from safe, and neither were they. Part 4. The chamber was eerily quiet after the chaos had subsided. The Nexus core pulsed softly in the center of the room, its blue light casting long shadows on the walls. Claire Harper stood near the console, her hands resting on its smooth surface as she stared at the glowing orb. Her mind raced with possibilities and doubts. Could humanity truly handle the power of the Nexus, or would it tear them apart, just as it had centuries ago? Jack Monroe leaned against a nearby wall, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He watched Ethan Cole carefully, his sharp eyes narrowing whenever the glowing man moved. Ethan seemed weaker now, his body flickering faintly like a dying flame. Whatever he'd done to stabilize the Nexus had taken a toll, but Jack wasn't ready to trust him yet. "So, what's the plan?" Jack asked finally, breaking the silence. His voice echoed slightly in the cavernous space. Claire turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "We need to figure out how to control the Nexus permanently. If we can harness its power without losing ourselves, it could change everything for the better." Or for the worse, Jack countered, crossing his arms. You heard Ethan, this thing almost destroyed Earth last time. What makes you think we won't screw it up again? Claire hesitated, glancing at Ethan before responding. Because, this time, we know the risks. We can prepare for them. And if we succeed, we might be able to unite humanity, end the wars, the greed, the division. Isn't that worth trying? Ethan stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. She's right, he said quietly. But controlling the Nexus requires more than knowledge or preparation. It demands sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? Jack demanded, his tone wary. Ethan met his gaze steadily. To anchor the Nexus, to keep it stable and prevent it from fracturing again, someone must merge with it completely. They will become its foundation, its guide, but they will lose themselves in the process. Claire's breath caught in her throat. You mean they'll cease to exist as an individual? Yes, Ethan replied simply. Their consciousness will dissolve into the Nexus, becoming part of the collective. Without such a connection, the Nexus cannot function safely. Jack shook his head, stepping between Claire and Ethan. No way, we're not letting anyone volunteer for that. There has to be another way. There isn't, Ethan said firmly. I've already tried to hold it together temporarily, but my strength is fading. If no one takes my place, the Nexus will collapse. And when it does, the backlash could destroy this entire facility, maybe even Earth itself. Claire looked down at her hands, her mind spinning. She knew what Ethan was asking of them. Someone would have to give up everything, for the sake of humanity. And deep down she wondered if she was willing to make that choice. I'll do it, she said suddenly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Jack spun around, his eyes wide with disbelief. Are you crazy? You can't seriously be considering this. It's the only way, Claire insisted, meeting his gaze. If I don't, the Nexus will fall apart and all of this will have been for nothing. Don't you see, this is bigger than us, Jack, bigger than me. No, Jack snapped, shaking his head. Absolutely not. I didn't come all this way, just to watch you throw your life away. You don't get a say in this, Claire shot back, her voice rising. This isn't about you or me or even Ethan. It's about giving humanity a chance to survive, to thrive. If I can make that happen, then it's worth it. Jack opened his mouth to argue, but Ethan cut him off. There is another option, he said calmly, drawing both their attention. I can take her place. Claire frowned. What do you mean? My existence is already tied to the Nexus, Ethan explained. I am a fragment of its creation, a remnant of its past. Merging with it fully would be less of a loss for me than it would be for either of you. Jack snorted derisively. Oh, sure. Let's trust the glowing guy who claims he's different from the rest of his super soldier buddies. That's enough, Jack, Claire said sharply, glaring at him. Then she turned to Ethan, her expression softening. Are you sure about this? Once you merge with the Nexus, there's no going back. Ethan nodded. I've always known my purpose, to protect humanity, even if it means sacrificing myself. This is why I was created. Claire hesitated, torn between gratitude and guilt. She wanted to protest, to find another solution, but deep down, she knew Ethan was right. This was his role, his destiny. All she could do was accept it. All right, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Do what you have to do. Jack stepped forward, gripping Claire's arm tightly. You can't let him do this. We don't know what will happen if he merges with the Nexus. What if it goes wrong? What if he loses control? We don't have a choice, Claire replied, pulling her arm free. Her green eyes were filled with determination but also sadness. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made. That's what being human is all about. Ethan walked toward the Nexus core, his glowing form growing brighter with each step. As he reached the platform, he placed a hand on the orb, closing his eyes as though listening to something only he could hear. The air around him shimmered, and the hum of energy grew louder, resonating through the chamber like a heartbeat. This is goodbye, Ethan said softly, opening his eyes one last time. Take care of each other. And remember, the Nexus is not a weapon. It is a bond. Use it wisely. Before either Jack or Claire could respond, Ethan's body dissolved into light, merging with the core in a blinding flash. The chamber shook, violently, the machinery whirring as the Nexus stabilized under his influence. When the light faded, the core pulsed steadily, its glow calm and reassuring. Claire sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face beneath her helmet. Jack knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. For once, he didn't say anything. There were no words that could ease the weight of what they'd just witnessed. After a few moments, Claire wiped her tears and stood up, her resolve hardening. "We need to get out of here," she said, her voice firm. "Ethan gave us a second chance. We can't waste it." Jack nodded, helping her to her feet. "Let's go home." As they made their way back through the tunnels, the facility began to shift around them. Walls sealed shut, doors locked behind them, and lights dimmed as the Nexus adjusted to its new anchor. By the time they reached the surface, the ruins of Earth stretched before them, silent and still. Claire paused at the edge of the crater where the Iron Wren waited, gazing up at the toxic sky. "Do you think we'll ever come back?" she asked quietly. Jack shrugged, leaning against the ship's hull. "Maybe. But if we do, it'll be because we've earned the right to call this place home again." Claire smiled faintly, climbing aboard the ship. As they lifted off, leaving Earth behind once more, she couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Humanity had been forged in fire and pain, shaped by trials that would have broken lesser species. But now, thanks to Ethan's sacrifice, they had a chance to rise above their flaws, to become something greater. And somewhere deep within the Nexus, Ethan's voice echoed softly, reminding them that true strength lay not in domination, but in unity. Part 5. The journey back to the Iron Wren was quiet, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Claire Harper sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring out the viewport as Earth faded into the distance. Her mind replayed Ethan's final moments, the way his body had dissolved into light, merging with the Nexus core. She couldn't shake the feeling that they'd left something unfinished behind, even though the facility seemed stable now. Jack Monroe focused on flying, his hands gripping the controls tightly. He wasn't one for deep thoughts or emotional reflection, but even he felt the gravity of what they'd witnessed. Sacrifice wasn't a word he used often, but there was no other way to describe what Ethan had done. The glowing man had given up everything to ensure humanity's survival, and Jack couldn't help but wonder if they were truly worthy of such devotion. "Do you think it'll work?" Jack asked finally, breaking the silence. His voice was low, almost hesitant. Claire turned to look at him, her green eyes distant. "What do you mean?" "The Nexus," Jack clarified, glancing over his shoulder. "Do you think it'll actually bring people together, or is it just another tool waiting to be misused?" Claire hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I don't know," she admitted after a moment. "It depends on how we use it. If we approach it with care, if we remember what Ethan said about unity instead of domination, then maybe it can help us heal the divisions that have torn humanity apart." "And if we don't?" Jack pressed, his tone skeptical. "Then we'll fail," Claire replied simply. "But failing doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Humanity has always been messy, flawed, and imperfect. That's who we are. But we're also resilient. We adapt, we survive, and sometimes we even learn." Jack didn't respond. Right away. He wasn't convinced, but he respected Claire's optimism. It was part of what made her so determined and so infuriating at times. Still, he couldn't deny that her passion had kept them going when things looked hopeless. As they entered hyperspace, the stars outside blurred into streaks of light. Claire leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes for a moment. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but her mind refused to rest. There was still so much to figure out. How would they explain the Nexus to others? Who could they trust with such power? And most importantly, how could they ensure it wouldn't fall into the wrong hands? "We need to tell someone," Claire said suddenly, sitting upright. Someone who can help us decide what to do next. Jack raised an eyebrow. Who exactly did you have in mind? The Galactic Council? Because I'm pretty sure they'd lock us up before we got 2 words out. I'm serious, Claire insisted. We can't keep this to ourselves. The Nexus is too important. If we try to handle it alone, we'll make mistakes. Big ones. Jack sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. All right, fine. Let's say we find someone trustworthy. What then? Do we just hand over control of the Nexus and hope for the best? No, Claire replied firmly. We stay involved. We guide the process. But we can't do it all by ourselves. We need allies. People who understand the stakes and are willing to work toward a better future. Jack shook his head, muttering under his breath. You really think there are enough good people out there to make this work? There has to be, Claire said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? A few days later, they arrived at their destination, a small research station orbiting a distant moon. It wasn't much to look at, a cluster of modular buildings surrounded by solar panels and communication arrays, but it housed some of the brightest minds in the galaxy. Among them was Dr. Laura Bennett, an old colleague of Claire's who specialized in advanced biotechnology. When they docked, Laura greeted them warmly, though her smile faltered when she saw the exhaustion etched on their faces. You two look like you've been through hell, she remarked, ushering them inside. What happened? Claire exchanged a glance with Jack before launching into an explanation. She told Laura everything: the ruins of Earth, the Nexus, Ethan's sacrifice, and the potential consequences of their discovery. At first, Laura listened skeptically, interrupting occasionally to ask questions. But as Claire continued, her expression shifted from disbelief to awe. This changes everything, Laura said finally, pacing the room. If the Nexus works the way you describe, it could revolutionize how we interact, not just with each other, but with the universe itself. That's the problem, Jack interjected, leaning against the wall. People hear revolution and they think power. They'll fight over it, exploit it, destroy it, or worse. Laura nodded thoughtfully. He's right. The Nexus is dangerous, but ignoring it isn't an option either. If we don't take responsibility, someone else will, and they might not share our values. Claire leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. That's why we need your help. You're smart, cautious, and ethical. If anyone can figure out how to use the Nexus responsibly, it's you. Laura hesitated, clearly weighing the risks. Finally, she let out a slow breath. All right, I'm in. But we'll need a plan and resources. This isn't something we can tackle alone. Over the next several hours, the 3 of them brainstormed strategies, outlining steps to secure the Nexus and prevent its misuse. They agreed to assemble a team of trusted experts, scientists, engineers, philosophers, and diplomats who could contribute different perspectives to the project. They also decided to keep the location of the Nexus a secret, sharing only the information necessary to move forward. By the time they finished, dawn was breaking over the moon's horizon, casting a pale light through the station's windows. Claire stood near the viewport watching the sunrise. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but they weren't walking it alone anymore. Jack joined her, handing her a cup of coffee. You really believe this is going to work, don't you? Claire smiled faintly, taking a sip. I have to. Otherwise, Ethan's sacrifice would have been for nothing. Jack didn't argue. Instead, he gazed out at the stars, his thoughts drifting to the glowing man who had saved them all. I hope you're right, he said quietly. For everyone's sake. In the weeks that followed, their efforts began to bear fruit. A small group of specialists gathered at the research station, pooling their knowledge and skills to study the Nexus remotely. Communication with Earth remained limited, as the planet's environment was still too hostile for prolonged exposure. But progress was steady, and for the first time in centuries, humanity dared to dream of returning home. One evening, as the team reviewed data from the Nexus core, Claire found herself thinking about Ethan. His voice echoed in her memory, calm, and steady, reminding her of the importance of unity. She realized then that the Nexus wasn't just a tool, it was a legacy, a reminder of humanity's capacity for greatness and its potential for destruction. And somewhere, deep within the heart of Earth, the Nexus pulsed softly, waiting for the day when humanity would rise to meet its promise. Part 6. The research station hummed with activity as the team worked tirelessly to understand the Nexus. Every day brought new challenges and discoveries, but progress was slow. The Nexus was unlike anything they had encountered before, a blend of technology and consciousness that defied conventional explanation. Claire Harper spent most of her time analyzing data, running simulations, and consulting with Dr. Laura Bennett. Meanwhile, Jack Monroe kept a watchful eye on the group, ensuring no one got careless or greedy. Despite their efforts, tensions began to rise. Some members of the team argued over how to proceed, while others grew frustrated with the lack of clear answers. It didn't help that the stakes were so high. Failure could mean disaster not just for humanity, but for countless other species across the galaxy. One evening, after another long day of meetings and debates, Claire found herself alone in the lab. She sat at her workstation, staring at the holographic display of the Nexus core. Its pulsing light seemed almost alive, as if it were waiting patiently for them to figure things out. Claire sighed, rubbing her temples. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. "Still working?" Jack asked, stepping into the room. His voice startled her, and she turned to see him leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. "Couldn't sleep," Claire admitted, offering a small smile. "Too much on my mind." Jack nodded, walking over to join her. "You think we're doing the right thing, trusting these people?" "I don't know," Claire replied honestly. "But I do know we can't do this alone. If we want to use the Nexus responsibly, we need help, from people who care about more than power or profit." Jack frowned, glancing at the hologram. "I just hope you're not underestimating human nature. People are selfish, Claire, they always have been." "I'm not naive," Claire said firmly. "I know there's risk, but giving up isn't an option. Ethan gave us a chance to fix what went wrong last time, to make things better. We owe it to him to try." Jack didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied her face, seeing the determination in her eyes. He admired her passion, even if it sometimes scared him. Finally, he nodded. "All right. But if anyone tries to take advantage of this, I'll be the first to stop them." Claire smiled faintly, grateful for his support. "Deal." A few days later, the team gathered in the main conference room to review their latest findings. Laura stood at the front, presenting a series of charts and graphs that outlined the Nexus's energy patterns and potential applications. The room buzzed with excitement as the researchers discussed the implications. "This is incredible," one scientist said, gesturing toward the data. "If we can harness the Nexus's power, we could solve some of humanity's biggest problems: energy shortages, environmental collapse, even disease." "But we have to be careful," another added cautiously. "We've seen what happens when humanity gets too ambitious. Look at Earth, we pushed too far, too fast, and now it's uninhabitable." Claire listened intently, weighing each argument. She knew they were right. The Nexus was both a gift and a threat. It had the potential to unite humanity, but only if they approached it with humility and caution. "What about control?" Jack asked suddenly, breaking into the conversation. "Who decides how the Nexus is used? Who makes sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands?" The room fell silent as everyone considered his question. It was a valid concern, one they hadn't fully addressed yet. Laura cleared her throat, stepping forward. "That's why we need to establish safeguards, rules and protocols to ensure the Nexus is used ethically. Maybe even create a governing body to oversee its operation." "Sounds good in theory," Jack countered, crossing his arms. "But who's going to enforce those rules? And what happens if someone breaks them?" "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Laura replied, though her tone suggested uncertainty. Claire stood up, drawing everyone's attention. "This isn't just about rules or oversight. It's about trust. We have to believe that humanity can learn from its mistakes, that we're capable of using the Nexus for good instead of greed. Her words hung in the air, resonating with the team. For a moment, no one spoke. Then slowly, heads began to nod in agreement. She's right, one researcher said quietly. If we let fear dictate our actions, we'll never move forward. Exactly, Claire continued, her voice steady. Ethan sacrificed himself so we could have this chance. Let's honor that by proving we're worthy of it. Over the next few weeks, the team focused on developing a framework for the Nexus's use. They drafted guidelines emphasizing transparency, accountability, and collaboration. They also created contingency plans in case something went wrong, protocols, designed to shut down the Nexus safely if necessary. As their work progressed, Claire noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The initial excitement had given way to a sense of purpose, a shared commitment to making the Nexus a force for good. Even Jack seemed less skeptical, though he remained vigilant, always watching for signs of trouble. One night, after a particularly productive meeting, Claire stepped outside the station to clear her head. The moon's surface stretched endlessly. Before her, bathed in the soft glow of distant stars. She thought about Earth, buried beneath layers of ash and despair, and wondered if humanity would ever return to reclaim it. "You okay?" Jack asked, joining her on the observation deck. "I'm fine," Claire replied, smiling slightly. "Just thinking about everything." Jack leaned against the railing beside her, gazing out at the horizon. "It's a lot to take in, isn't it? All this responsibility?" "It is," Claire admitted. "But it's also hopeful. For the first time in a long time, I feel like we're moving in the right direction." Jack nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, me too." They stood there for a while, enjoying the quiet. Despite the challenges ahead, Claire felt a renewed sense of optimism. The Nexus wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol of humanity's resilience, proof that they could rise above their flaws and strive for something greater. And somewhere, deep within the heart of Earth, the Nexus pulsed softly, waiting for the day when humanity would prove itself ready to embrace its promise. Part 7. Months passed, and the team at the research station grew closer as they worked together. The Nexus remained a mystery in many ways, but they had made significant progress. They learned how to stabilize its energy output, prevent fluctuations, and even establish a limited connection with it for testing purposes. Each success brought them one step closer to their goal of using the Nexus responsibly. Claire Harper spent long hours in the lab, her mind consumed by the project. She felt the weight of responsibility keenly, knowing that humanity's future depended on their decisions. Jack Monroe stayed by her side, offering support when she needed it, and keeping an eye out for any signs of trouble. Together, they became the backbone of the team, a balance of optimism and caution. But despite their efforts, cracks began to form within the group. Not everyone agreed on how to proceed, and tensions simmered beneath the surface. Some members believed they should push forward quickly, eager to unlock the Nexus's full potential. Others argued for patience, warning against rushing into something they didn't fully understand. One evening, during a heated meeting, the disagreements came to a head. A younger scientist named Ryan voiced his frustration loudly. "We're wasting time," he exclaimed, slamming his fist on the table. "The Nexus could change everything. End poverty, cure diseases, solve climate problems. Why are we holding back?" "We're holding back because we don't know what we're dealing with," Laura Bennett countered sharply. "If we rush this, we risk making the same mistakes that destroyed Earth." Ryan shook his head, his face red with anger. "That's just an excuse. We've been studying this thing for months. It's time to act." Claire stood up, raising her hands to calm the room. "Both of you have valid points," she said firmly. "But arguing isn't going to help. We need to focus on finding common ground." Jack leaned forward, his voice low but commanding. "And we need to remember why we're here. This isn't about personal ambition or quick fixes. It's about doing what's right for everyone." The room fell silent as his words sank in. Slowly, the tension eased. though the underlying conflict remained unresolved. Claire knew they couldn't afford division, not now when so much was at stake. Later that night, Claire found herself alone in the lab again. She stared at the holographic display of the Nexus core, its steady pulse a reminder of the power they held in their hands. Her thoughts drifted to Ethan, whose sacrifice had given them this chance. She wondered if he would approve of how far they'd come, or if he would be disappointed by their struggles. "You look like you've got the weight of the galaxy on your shoulders," Jack said, stepping into the room. Claire chuckled softly, though there was no humor in it. "Feels that way sometimes." Jack walked over, leaning against the workstation beside her. "You can't carry all of this by yourself, you know. That's why we're a team." "I know," Claire replied, sighing. "But it's hard not to feel responsible. What if we mess this up? What if we make things worse instead of better?" Jack frowned, considering her words. "Then we'll fix it. Together. That's what humans do. We adapt, we survive, and yeah, sometimes we screw up. But we keep trying." Claire smiled faintly, grateful for his reassurance. "I hope you're right." The turning point came unexpectedly. During a routine test, the team managed to establish a deeper connection with the Nexus than ever before. For a brief moment, they experienced a glimpse of its true nature, a vast network of thoughts, emotions, and memories stretching across time and space. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. When the connection ended, the room was filled with stunned silence. No one spoke for several minutes, each person processing what they had felt. "That was incredible," Laura whispered finally, her voice trembling. "It's not just technology. It's alive. And dangerous," Jack added grimly. "If we lose control of that, we're done for." Claire nodded, her heart pounding. "This changes everything. We can't treat the Nexus like a tool anymore. It's more than that. It's a living entity, part of who we are." The realization hit the team like a wave. From that moment on, their approach shifted. They stopped thinking of the Nexus as something to harness and started seeing it as something to nurture. Their focus turned to building trust, with the Nexus and with each other. As weeks turned into months, the team made remarkable strides. They developed new protocols for interacting with the Nexus, emphasizing respect and cooperation. They also began reaching out to leaders across the galaxy, sharing their findings and inviting them to join the effort. To their surprise, many responded positively, eager to contribute to a project that promised unity rather than domination. Claire took the lead in these discussions, explaining the Nexus's potential while stressing the importance of caution. "This isn't about power," she said repeatedly. "It's about connection, about working together to build a better future." Her words resonated with many, inspiring hope in places where none had existed before. Slowly but surely, humanity began to unite, not through force or fear, but through shared purpose. One day, as the team prepared for another round of tests, Jack pulled Claire aside. "You've done good," he said simply, his tone unusually serious. Claire blinked in surprise. "What?" "You've kept us grounded," Jack explained, "kept us focused on what really matters. I may not always agree with you, but I respect the hell out of you for sticking to your principles." Claire smiled, touched by his rare display of vulnerability. "Thanks, Jack. I couldn't have done it without you." Jack shrugged, looking away. "Yeah, well, don't get used to it." They shared a laugh, the kind that comes from months of shared struggles and triumphs. In that moment, Claire realized how far they had come, not just as individuals, but as a team. The Nexus continued to evolve, growing stronger and more stable with each passing day. Its presence was felt throughout the galaxy, a quiet reminder of humanity's resilience and potential. And though challenges lay ahead, the team faced them with renewed determination. Somewhere deep within the Nexus, fragments of Ethan's consciousness lingered, watching silently. He had given everything to ensure humanity's survival, and now he saw the seeds of hope taking root. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in centuries, it was a road worth walking. And somewhere, on a distant moon orbiting a forgotten star, a small group of humans worked tirelessly to prove that they were worthy of the gift they had been given. Part 8. Years passed, and the Nexus became more than just a project. It became a symbol. Humanity, once scattered and divided across the stars, began to come together in ways no one had thought possible. The research station that Claire Harper and Jack Monroe had called home for so long grew into a hub of collaboration, attracting scientists, engineers, philosophers, and leaders from all corners of the galaxy. It was no longer just about studying the Nexus. It was about rebuilding what had been lost. Claire stood on the observation deck of the expanded facility, gazing out at the fleet of ships arriving daily. Refugees, researchers, and pioneers from countless worlds were coming to Earth. Not the broken, toxic Earth of centuries past, but a renewed version of their ancestral home. Thanks to the Nexus's guidance, humanity had found a way to heal the planet, purifying its atmosphere and restoring its oceans. The scars remained, but life was returning, slowly and steadily. "It's hard to believe this is real," Jack said, joining her. His voice carried a note of awe, something rare for him. Claire smiled faintly, her green eyes reflecting the light of the distant sun. "It's real. We did it." Jack shook his head, leaning against the railing. "Not just us. Everyone who believed in what we were doing. Without them, none of this would have been possible." Claire nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. They had started as two scavengers driven by curiosity and desperation. Now they were part of something much bigger, a movement that spanned galaxies and united species. It wasn't perfect. There were still disagreements, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But it was progress. And for the first time in centuries, humanity had hope. On Earth itself, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Teams worked tirelessly to rebuild cities, planting trees where deserts had once stretched endlessly. Rivers flowed again, carrying clean water through landscapes that had been barren for millennia. The ruins of old civilizations stood as monuments to the mistakes of the past, reminders of how far humanity had come, and how far it still had to go. One morning, Claire and Jack landed on Earth's surface, stepping out of their ship onto soft grass. It was strange to see the planet so vibrant, so alive. The air smelled fresh, tinged with the scent of wildflowers. Birds chirped overhead, their songs filling the silence that had once been oppressive. "This place, it's beautiful," Claire whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jack looked around, taking in the sight of towering trees and clear skies. "Yeah, hard to imagine it was ever anything else." They walked together toward a newly constructed monument in the heart of what used to be North America. It was simple yet powerful. A statue of Ethan Cole standing tall, his glowing form captured in stone. Beneath it, an inscription read, "To those who gave everything so others might live." Claire knelt before the statue, placing a hand on its base. She felt a lump rise in her throat, remembering Ethan's sacrifice. He had given up his individuality to anchor the Nexus, ensuring humanity's survival. His voice still echoed in her memory, calm and steady, reminding her of the importance of unity. "You think he'd be proud?" Jack asked quietly, standing beside her. "I think he'd be hopeful," Claire replied, standing up. "He knew what humanity was capable of, both the good and the bad. I think he'd see this as proof that we can choose to do better." Jack nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Let's make sure we keep proving him right." As word spread about Earth's renewal, more and more people came to witness the miracle firsthand. Families settled in newly built towns, farmers tilled fertile soil, and children played under open skies. For the first time in generations, Earth felt like home again. Among the newcomers was a young girl named Lily. Her parents had brought her from a distant colony, seeking a better life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she wandered away from her family's campsite and climbed a hill overlooking the land. She stared up at the stars, her eyes wide with wonder. "Why are they so bright?" she asked, pointing. At the sky. Her mother knelt beside her, smiling softly. Because they remind us where we came from and where we're going. Lily tilted her head, puzzled. Where did we come from? Her mother hesitated, then placed a hand on her shoulder. From here, from Earth. This is where humanity began, and it's where we'll always belong. Far above, the Nexus pulsed gently, its energy flowing through the planet like a heartbeat. Somewhere within it, fragments of Ethan's consciousness lingered, watching silently. He had given everything to ensure humanity's survival, and now, he saw the fruits of his sacrifice. The road ahead would still be challenging, but it was a road worth walking. Back at the research station, Claire and Jack prepared for another mission. Though Earth was thriving, there was still work to be done. The Nexus had the potential to unite not just humanity, but countless other species across the galaxy. It was a daunting task, but one they were ready to face. You know, Jack said, as they boarded their ship, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually looking forward to whatever comes next. Claire grinned, strapping herself into the co-pilot seat. Me too. We've come a long way, haven't we? Jack smirked, firing up the engines. Yeah, but don't let it go to your head. As the ship lifted off, heading toward the stars, Claire glanced back at Earth one last time. The planet glowed softly beneath them, a beacon of hope in the vastness of space. It was a reminder of humanity's resilience, of their ability to adapt, survive, and grow stronger together. And somewhere deep within the Nexus, Ethan's voice echoed softly, whispering words of encouragement. You are the species that forged the galaxy. Show them what you're made of. The journey ahead would be long and uncertain, but for the first time in centuries, humanity faced it with unity, purpose, and hope. Earth was no longer just a memory. It was a promise. A promise that even the toughest species could rise from the ashes and build a brighter future. And so, under the watchful gaze of the Nexus, humanity took its first steps toward a new dawn.